Hello guys, this is Andre, a certified translator and a real estate concierge, and today we're talking about driving in Belarus, getting a car and getting a license. It's not a problem to drive around here. Many people I've met who rented a car out here or who came by car, there were fewer people like that, said that Belarusians drive all right, everything is pretty well mannered, there's no road rage, definitely no shootings. You can see my gun clip about shootings in Belarus, well, there are almost none. And so how do you move around and how do you get a car over here? Let's discuss this in the current video. As we speak about your driving around, guys, we're talking about renting in the first line and about driving license. In the past, when tourism was actually around, people traveling around the Baltics were sometimes thinking to rent a car and drive over here. Back then it was impossible because driving into Belarus and its complicated toll road system was not a good idea for the rental owners back overseas, so I actually haven't heard of many cases of people renting a car somewhere in Europe and driving over here. People used the friends' cars, people used their own cars. Now the toll road system has been a little bit more humanized, made more good for users, and it's not a problem to drive in. But generally not on a rented car. You rent over here, and whatever license you have to have here, the local rental companies often stipulate international license. You will find out here locally. It's not a problem to drive around on your own home license, depending on its design, but generally if it's a protected document, if it's a Vienna Convention, 1968 Vienna Convention type document, it shouldn't be a problem, and the police clarification that I got on this account says it doesn't have to be translated. However, you have to double check this with your rental guys before you take a trip. Obviously, it's getting a little bit more complicated when you settle over here and you have temporary residency, at which point nothing gets complicated. You just have to have your license, maybe sometimes with translation, maybe just in case you'll have it translated anyway, and then present it to the cops that pull you over and stretch their English muscle talking to you. But again, as far as I understand, the Vienna Convention type licenses don't have to be translated. And of course it gets more complicated if you want to get permanent residency, in which case after you've got one you have 90 days to take an exam. It may be in English. It's unlikely you'll be taking an exam in Russian for various reasons, for various obvious reasons. So you'd have to go to the local examination board, present your medical check that you do in a special polyclinic, present your home driving license, the translation, and then qualify for the exam, which basically occurs every couple of hours. So the exam part is perhaps the easiest one. Before we get to discuss the exam routine, let's talk about buying a car here locally. It's the most widespread thing that people would do, and my first refugees actually have, or my first relocation guys, have already started shopping. Some buy from a dealership, in which case technical examination is a joke, and in some cases it's a second-hand car, in which case there's almost often something that you have to fix there first before undergoing traffic pass examination, traffic certification, the thing that occurs once in every year or every 2 years if the car is over 10 years old. Tax has to be paid, and you know, all this check of fire extinguisher and hazard sign and all the things that have to be there. For a foreigner, it's kind of vital because you guys have 5 violations before the residency gets zeroed and you get kicked out, so you have to go by the book. A local, such as your humble servant here, is not really bothering about these things for now because, well, we just pay fines once we get caught. It's a bit of a lottery, which also helps to stretch the legal muscle when you get caught, pulled over, and you discuss things with the traffic cops. So again, you have to buy a car, you have to first find a car. Now finding an option is a little bit tricky. The number of second-hand options on the market now is shrinking because a lot of Russians are shopping and the cars don't get imported anymore on the scale they used to be. So to a foreigner, buying a car here would be a challenge. I've just been looking for a replacement to my minibus, and I found a nice little car here in Minsk, which to my eye, to my feeling, was pretty much overpriced. And again, it has some technical issues that we'll have to attend to very soon, let's say. Once you're done searching, you may consider taking a few trips with specially trained guy, with an educated mechanic, to another town. If you've seen some, let's say, now nice Audi from 2015 and it's claimed to be with good mileage and no issues, but directly you come there, you realize that the photograph of a rusty door was somehow missing from the description and the guy was just bullshitting you. And basically that's 9 cases out of 10 in my experience. So then you'll be finding your option and you'll be reaching a deal. It seems that traditionally it doesn't really matter what has been invested into the car, and what has to be done is a kind of a buyer's advantage, because this can be haggled, pushed down off the price. So this is more or less to your advantage, whatever stuff you can uncover with your mechanic. So once you find an acceptable car, suppose it's here in Minsk, you go to the traffic cops, and we're in the early morning where guys are lining up for the VIN check, and you have a little printout and you want to go with the owner, and you will have passport, of course, and you'll have your residency, which will be tied up to the car registration. So the car will be registered for 1 year, subject to extension once you've got your residency again next year. And you pass the VIN check, and then you go to the traffic cops office itself. It's, by the way, one of the 2 or 3 points is by the migration office of the Centralny district, the 3rd floor. So it's one same building that many of you know too well. And you line up for the payments, which are 3 payments that can be handled off a phone, and then you submit your papers into one of the windows. For those registered in Minsk, they are blue, and for those registered in Minsk district, they are kind of brownish. And then everything happens swiftly. You submit your paperwork, it gets checked with the seller's number plates that you may want to buy, or you may want to buy the new ones. It's a 32 ruble difference in the price that you pay in the fee. And then almost immediately, sometimes in a couple of days, if the case is kind of complicated, there may be different varieties of the deals. Most often it's very much on the spot, or at least 3 hours later, you come back to a certain window without queue anymore and collect your new number plates and your technical passport, the certificate of the car registration. It's a green laminated paper with your basic details in there that you also bring to the insurance guy once this happens, and insurance guys provide you with an insurance, which is a little bit more costly to the foreigners than to the locals. Somewhat hectic room with all these lines to the bank and to the registration spots and to the windows to ask a casual question, may be a little bit chaotic, so you may want to bring in a translator of your own unless your Russian is almost perfect, or you would like to exercise, and then otherwise it should be fairly smooth. The earlier you come, the earlier you get served. This principle works for most of the bureaucratic offices here, and having an online banking, some good app here always helps the process as well. The capable translator may help you out if you're stuck with your payment, or you can just use your own if you are coming on your own. That's not a problem. As I have recently learned, it seems like if you're a foreign customer, foreign resident, foreign temporary resident, and you've come here on your own car, you can only bring it in temporarily. You can make it 3 months for the first go, and you can make it up to a year without paying any fee, and then you'd have to leave because you have no permanent residency. And unless my client that opted to go with some customs mediators, customs brokers to research this situation deeper, unless he finds out something different, this would be the information to go on with. Permanent residency holders can import their cars apparently without any fees, and this is a given fact. So one of the guys handled it, and we may get to this story and explain it later as I get more guys on permanent residency. Once you've got your little car registered to local plates, there will be a car tax charged every year. The tax office will find you just like they do for your little house or apartment. You normally pay it by November. They normally send it by post, although sometimes for my clients I'm actually distributing these notices in a circulated message, so no big deal. If we recall the story about 5 traffic fines, or 5 fines in general, most of them may be speeding fines. The Yandex Maps that I highly recommend to use whether or not you're driving a car have the radars marked. Most of them are real, and most of them come with a warning about the speed limit, so you have reasonable time to slow down. Well, some of my clients are speeding around, so they have to fix it, and the speeding ticket here is normally half of 1 base unit, which is for now this much. The faster guys get it double, so depending on how much you exceed by, the speed limit will be appropriately higher. Parking is also half of the base unit, but you have to really park ugly in Minsk to get that, because with me and my parking manners, have never got a parking ticket. Those little paid parking spots marked with yellow tables in the city center, they're not really, let's say, too restricted. If you don't have a bar not letting you out, paying is not that mandatory. I sometimes do it, I sometimes don't, but there's no penalty coming if you haven't, even with a yellow card under your wipers, so it's no big deal. And then, of course, the worst sin that can happen, and recently one of the guys in the group complained about this. He had a shot. Basically, he was driving intoxicated, so he got pulled over, and without getting a translator in or some legal representative, he was signing some papers, and apparently he's standing by to get kicked out of the country. In another case, his compatriot basically had a shot after the accident, as they say, but according to local traffic rules, this is just equal to drinking as you drive. There's 0.3 promille, or whatever they call, for a limit here for driving, drunken driving, and the rest is quite bad. A lot of paperwork, pretty bad fines, and the residency normally gets zeroed after you do this. So there's no 5 times list just once, if that's about it. Well, I won't be giving you a lecture about how to negotiate things with traffic cops. I would just remind you that in Belarus everything can be negotiated. And there's just one thing you may want to like to know: the recognition of your violation and the, let's say, confession and apology in a formal way, of course. Here, depending on how bad the violation is, we're talking about administrative violations that are not criminal things, like leaving the accident site or something like this, which is also, by the way, not a crime. The recognition of your own violation is subject to giving you the lowest fine in the book. Of course, the cops often misuse that, and in a few hours I'll be working on such a case with a guy who screwed up his registration. But that is something you may want to know. Getting a local driving license for permanent residency holders seems to be a fun challenge. Fun here is in quotes. There was this guy who will remain nameless, who got his medical check and the pictures of the right size, and was planning to go to the examination board of the police, where I accompanied him as a translator. Apparently I wasn't useless. And once we got our line coming up, they have those exams every 2 hours again, the lady checked his Mexican driving license and said, after coming back in some 20 minutes, she says, "Sorry guys, my verification device here is a little bit funny, because essentially this was Brazilian driving license, not Mexican. The Brazilian driving license there was basically just a piece of card with some lamination cover, plastic on top. There was no holograms, there was no deep protection of a document, so she just couldn't accept it as a driving license. Besides, the paper, the driving license said the AE categories, which here have a very different interpretation from Brazil, perhaps. So we were politely sent off, and he went home and got his Mexican license, which even to me looked like a nice card, which produced all sorts of shine at different angles. But again, it was not accepted, because apparently Mexican driving license isn't protected enough to count as a document. And besides, its translation said the C category. Here it's trucks. So the guy got stuck with his permanent residency, already granting him kind of permanent residency, but his licenses not being good enough. The traffic cops lady suggested that the translator put it in a way that would embrace the B category, the normal small vehicles here. But again, as a translator, as a certified translator doing these things, mostly the bureau does these things, not me, I would say it's kind of tricky. So guys, before you go for permanent residency, make sure you have a driving license if it's essential for you, that would pass all these things, requirements, and there will be no issues coming out of the exam here. The exam itself comes out on cards, occurs on English-speaking cards. You just have to pull a card like in the old-fashioned days. And the exam is fairly straightforward, except the translation, as some people who passed it, is not straightforward. I don't have any questions. Nobody ever took me to that exam, unfortunately. And I can only assume that it's basic questions about traffic rules that are more or less universal, and you just have to revise it on a computer before taking it. And apparently there is no limit of taking the exam. You can take it as many times as you wish. Well guys, as you see, driving around is not a big deal, and especially driving around on the car that you've bought over here. It's now a bit of a problem to bring in your own car from abroad, so you may be selling it somewhere else and buying your own car here. But for the first period, like the first few months of your living here, I would recommend to actually see if you need a car. If you're buying a flat somewhere central and near metro, that may not be really a part of the deal. And see if you want to buy one and if you need a translator's assistance. Well then, as the morning is burning up and it's going to be plus 30 centigrade again over here for the next few days, I would like to thank you very much for staying with the channel, for keeping it going. If you have 5, 10, 20 bucks, you could wire to one of these two platforms linked underneath the video. That would be very, very welcome. Thank you very much for supporting. And thank you for your feedback. Any questions, any driving experiences down below under this video are very welcome. I hope I'll see you someday in Minsk. Maybe we'll take a ride through the streets of Minsk to see the traffic. Maybe I'll take you on an apartment deal hunt. That's up to you. Thank you very much for watching, and cheers from Minsk. See you later.